Susan, if you're ready, we're ready to go.
Okay, great. All right. Well, everyone, we will start our meeting with the moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Ms. Babb.
Now for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of
America,
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone who is all our board members and our staff in attendance on the screen, and also those who are watching by live stream. As I've stated in our last few meetings, we know that this electronic format does create some challenges, and one of them is the inability for us to hold public forums. So we do have an email address that's been set up, boardcomments@knoxschools.org. So if you're watching and you have comments that you would like to share with all board members at the same time, please use that email address, and they will be sent to each board member immediately. And as you may be aware, we tentatively had a called meeting that was scheduled for Wednesday, May 20th to consider the fiscal year 2021 budget. We will be delaying that meeting until Wednesday, May 27th at 5 p.m. And this will allow our finance team to hopefully receive the March sales tax figures and just have as much up-to-date information as possible as we consider the budget. So as we get closer to that date, we will announce the venue and other information as soon as it's confirmed. I wanted to give a quick update on our student representative selection committee. The process, I wanted to give you an update on that process. It's been affected due to our school closure. So the original deadline for the student applications was March 26th. And so when school closed, that deadline was changed to April 16th. And then with the second school closure, the time was extended and the information was shared again with principals and school counselors, and the date was extended until May 1st. We have now received, so by May 1st, we received 17 applications, and those have been redacted and given to the selection committee, which consists of Secondary Education Executive Director Danny Trent, our current student representative Noah Kelly, Principal Brad Coram, community member Angela Fisher, and myself. We will be reviewing the applications and meeting over the next couple of weeks and then completing interviews of the top candidates. We plan to announce the student representative at one of our June board meetings. And speaking of our student representative, I know last week this was kind of mentioned, but I wanted to just take a moment to recognize Noah Kelly. Noah is the valedictorian at Carnes High School. And so Noah, I know I speak for the rest of the board members also when I just say congratulations. We're so proud of you and all your accomplishments, and we can't wait to see the wonderful things you do in the future, and you'll have to be sure to stay in touch so we know how things are going. So congratulations again.
Thank you.
Indeed.
And I'm going to turn now to Superintendent Thomas to ask if you have any announcements or information you'd like to share.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'll take just a few minutes to address graduation, just to update you just a little bit. Since we met last week, we've heard from you, obviously, our families, our community, and I want to emphasize that we want what you want. We would love nothing more than for our seniors to have a graduation celebration that they can be excited about while doing our part to keep our community safe. Earlier this week, we requested a meeting with Mayor Jacobs, and this morning, members of my staff and I met with Mayor Jacobs and Commissioner Justin Biggs, and we presented our initial graduation plan, which we drafted in April, which was prior to the announced COVID-19 reopening phases. Both Mayor Jacobs and Commissioner Biggs are in full support of our initial plan, which calls for ceremonies in June allows for a limited number of guests. As of right now, we would begin graduation ceremonies the week of June 8th, and they would extend through June 19th, just to give families some idea about the time frame. And we'll be announcing more information soon. We're still working on the details, and again, we'll share all of that information as soon as they're finalized. We know that some guests may not feel comfortable attending, so we'll be live streaming and recording these events. For those who attend, the expectation will be that they follow physical distancing, wear a mask, and other precautionary guidelines. We hope this provides some comfort to our students and families, but also knowing that depending on the spread of COVID-19, these plans could change. And again, we'll be sharing information, more information soon. And again, I would just like to thank Mayor Jacobs and also Commissioner Biggs for their full support of this plan for our seniors and their families. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Superintendent, for that update. And we'll just continue to hope that all the numbers stay low. Okay. Members, you were contacted this afternoon regarding deferring agenda item 8D, which was a purchase agreement for property located at Coward Mill Road for 30 days. And Superintendent Thomas and I have agreed to do so. I believe that Jim Snowden, our Director of Public Works and Engineering, is on the call. Mr. Snowden, would you like to make any comments?
Yes, Madam Chair. I appreciate the opportunity. We support this. We appreciate the superintendent and you allowing us to take 30 days and complete a traffic study so that we can look a little closer at some of the impacts to the Coward Mill Road to the east and how that may affect our upcoming Cherahela project. We think that there may not be a great number of improvements that may need to be needed, but we would like to categorize those and accurately determine their cost before that is purchased so that we could best serve the citizens. So we appreciate that and certainly would appreciate your support of that deferral.
Great, thank you so much. So that item will be deferred for 30 days. Okay, do we have any other requested changes to this agenda? Okay, do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, and as a reminder, we will maintain the same voting methods that we used during our April meeting, and this is cumbersome, but we will have a show of hands on consent agenda items, and then on all other items, we will have a roll call vote, and Ms. Coatney will take us through that, and it is a little tedious, so, but Ms. Coatney, take it away.
Item 5, consent agenda.
Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hill, a second by Mr. Mr. Norman. Any discussion? Okay, and then all in favor, if you can do a show of hands.
I have a discussion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Ms. Hill. Yes.
I would like to add at the end of agenda, please, a discussion and possible vote on the format of our budget meeting.
Second.
Okay.
Do we need a second there?
Okay.
There's a motion on the floor for consent agenda. So if we want to vote on that first, and then we can feel.
Okay.
I got blocked out. If you already, I apologize. I was out and then I just this second got in, so I missed that little sequence. My apologies.
That's okay. Okay, we'll come back to that, Ms. Hill.
All right, I'm sorry.
Would that be the correct thing? We'll go ahead and vote on the consent agenda. Okay, so any other discussion on the consent agenda? Okay, all in favor, you can do a show of hands. Okay, any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Okay, now since Ms. Hill was blocked, her signal was blocked a little bit. You had a change to the agenda, right, Ms. Hill?
I do, and I apologize for that. Yes, I'd like to propose adding to the end of agenda that we have a discussion and possible vote on the format that we use for our budget meeting, location, time.
Okay. Okay.
So moved. So moved.
Second.
Okay, so we have a first by Ms. Hill and a second by Mr. Norman. Do we have other discussion? Okay, all in favor for adding this agenda item to the end of our agenda today? Let's do that by a show of hands, please. Okay, and motion carries. So we will add that to the end of our agenda for today.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Coatney.
Item 6A, approve resolution for emergency temporary suspension of Knox County Board of Education policies C-123, D-510, I-341, I-370, I-372, I-381, I-390, J-120, and J-450 for the 2019-2020 school year in response to COVID-19.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I think that was Ms. Christie with a motion and Mr. Norman with a second. Discussion. I'm sorry.
That it was on with them. Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, any discussion? Who made that motion? Oh, Miss Owen, I'm sorry. Miss Owen made the motion and Mr. Norman seconded the motion. Thank you, Ms. Satterfield. Do we have discussion on this item? Okay.
Ms. Satterfield?
So moved. Oh, yes. What are we saying? What do you want to say?
Yes, a yes vote will be in support of this resolution.
Okay, so we're all gonna say yes. Okay, cool.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Mr. Norman?
Yes.
Ms. Babb?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan? I think Mr. McMillan is muted.
I'm having trouble here, but yes.
Okay, and Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Ms. Horn?
Yes.
That's 9 yes votes.
Okay, motion carries.
Item 7A, approve consolidated grant application and receipt of funds from the State of Tennessee Department of Education for federal Title 1A, Title I neglected and delinquent, Title 2A, Title III, and Title IV in the amount of $18,951,794.75 for fiscal year 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Norman, a second by Ms. Hill. Discussion. Okay, Ms. Coatney.
Ms. Satterfield?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Mr. Norman?
Yes.
Ms. Babb?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Ms. Horn?
Yes.
That's 9 yes votes.
Motion carries.
Item 7B, approve consolidated grant application and receipt of funds from the State of Tennessee Department of Education for special education services in the amount of $13,815,132 IDEA Part B, and for preschool special education services in the amount of $417,464 IDEA preschool for fiscal year 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Norman, a second by Ms. Satterfield. Discussion. Okay, Ms. Coatney.
Ms. Satterfield?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
Yes.
Mr. Norman?
Yes.
Ms. Babb?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Ms. Horn?
Yes.
9
Motion carries. Oh, sorry, motion carries. Thank you, Ms. Coatney.
yes. Item 7C, approve amended and restated memorandum of understanding with Simon Youth Foundation Incorporated regarding the continued development and operation of the Dr. Paul L. Kelly Volunteer Academy and receipt of grant funds in the amount of $100,000.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Owen, a second by Mr. Norman. Discussion? Okay, Ms. Coatney?
Ms. Satterfield,
Yes.
Ms. Owen,
Yes.
Mr. Norman,
Yes.
Ms. Babb,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
yes,
Ms. Bowles,
Yes.
Mr. McMillan,
yes,
Ms. Christie,
Yes.
Ms. Horn.
Yes.
That's 9 yes votes.
Motion carries.
Item 7D, approve grant contract with the State of Tennessee Department of Education for the provision of recruiting teacher mentors and administration of required programming and receipt of Mentors Matter Training Initiative grant in the amount of $58,111.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion by Mr. Norman, a second by Ms. Christie. Do we have discussion? Okay, Ms. Coatney?
Ms. Satterfield,
Yes.
Ms. Owen,
Yes.
Mr. Norman,
Yes.
Ms. Babb,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
yes,
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Mr. McMillan,
yes,
Ms. Christie,
Yes.
and Ms. Horn.
Yes.
9 yes.
Motion carries. Sorry.
Item 8A, approve fiscal year 2020 capital budget line item transfer in the amount of $128,541, transferring the remaining balance from the completed career and technical education Magnet High construction project account into the physical plant upgrades construction project account.
so moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hill, a second by Ms. Babb. Any discussion? Okay, Ms. Coatney?
Satterfield,
Gary,
Yeah.
do you have something?
No, I was just waving to the custodian.
Good. Tell him we said hello. Okay, thank
I will.
you. Sorry.
Ms. Satterfield,
Yes.
Ms. Owen,
Yes.
Mr. Norman,
Yes.
Ms. Babb,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
Yes,
Ms. Downs,
Yes.
Mr. McMillan,
yes,
Ms. Christie,
Yes.
Ms. Horn.
Yes.
That's 9 yes votes.
Okay, motion carries.
Item 8B, approve fiscal year 2020 capital budget line item transfer in the amount of $225,000 from the completed Inskip Elementary School building construction project account into the land acquisition project account.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by, I'm sorry, who did Ms. Owen make the motion and a second by Mr. Norman? Okay, any discussion? Okay, Ms. Coatney?
Ms. Satterfield,
Yes.
Ms. Owen,
Yes.
Mr. Norman,
Yes.
Ms. Babb,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
yes,
Ms. Bounds,
Yes.
Mr. McMillan,
yes,
Ms. Christie,
Yes.
and Ms. Horn.
Yes.
That's 9 yes votes.
Motion carries.
Item 8C, approve fiscal year 2020 capital budget line item transfer in the amount of $10,000 from the physical plant upgrades project account into the BEP growth account for portable classroom projects.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Norman, a second by Ms. Babb. Discussion? Okay, Ms. Coatney?
Ms. Satterfield,
Yes.
Ms. Owen,
Yes.
Mr. Norman,
Yes.
Ms. Babb,
Yes.
Ms. Hill,
yes,
Ms. Bounds,
Yes.
Mr. McMillan,
yes,
Ms. Christie,
Yes.
and Ms. Horn.
Yes.
That's 9 yes votes.
Okay, motion carries. And as a reminder to anyone who's watching, we did have a work session last week and we worked through all of these items and some questions were asked then. So just so that the public knows that. All right, Ms. Coatney.
Item 8D has been deferred. Item 8E, approve not any schools one-to-one student device deployment plan for grades kindergarten through 12 for the 2020-2021 school year.
So moved.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion by Ms. Hill, a second by Ms. Christie. Discussion. Ms. Owen?
I still have some concerns about the number of devices that we're talking about, since we still have several with 2 years of support. It seems to me that since we don't know a funding source yet, where this money is going to come from in the future, that it would be more responsible to look at a lower number until we are in a better financial situation.
Okay. Mr. Thomas, would anyone like to address that issue?
Yes, ma'am. And again, we can, whatever the pleasure of the board is, we think we would space out the purchases. We do have devices with time left on them, support left on them. So we would want to get the maximum use out of those devices that we have. So I think our thought level, and Ms. Byard can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong on this, but what we thought too is let's take into consideration the time the remaining on the devices and not purchase everything at the same time, and space those purchases out, which would help us financially too. But my thought too is we would go ahead and approve this, and I think we can come back to the board at whatever time before we do anything, and make sure that all board members are comfortable with the numbers that we're purchasing and how we can space that out so that we can get the maximum support out of all devices that we currently have. And Madam Chair, Ms. Byard may want to correct me if I'm wrong on anything there. So.
Okay, would you like to jump in, Ms. Byard, before we move to another board member?
Just a couple of comments. Mr. Thomas is exactly correct. I think Mr. McPherson has actually been working with our federal programs director to discuss that very concept. I want to emphasize that the plan contemplates buying a Chromebook for every student, but it does not specify the exact date of that purchase. So I think Mr. Thomas is correct, as we need to look at the staging, if you will, of those purchases. Mr. McPherson may want to add more to that. I think he has some late breaking info on that. I don't see him.
Mr. McPherson, would you like to weigh in on that, please?
Yes, Ms. Byard's correct. So Cheryl Martin has been working with the state on, maybe how we can utilize these, how we can deploy the devices, extend the life of the newer devices while also not endangering our compliance with ESSA. And so that's something we always have to keep our eyes on, because at a number of our Title I schools, they have used Title I funds to purchase newer devices. So we have to be careful in this plan to not exclude any students, because otherwise we get into a situation of supplanting rather than supplementing. So what we will do is continue to work with the state to make sure that we are in compliance while also extending the life of those newer devices. So it won't be that we're excluding anyone. It's just a matter of how we can, get the best bang for our buck, so to speak.
Okay, Ms. Owen, do you have any follow-up comment or question? Okay, Ms. Satterfield.
So I appreciate what the thorough thought of going back and looking at some things. So thank you so much for that, Superintendent Thomas. How do we vote on that notion that we will, what you said at the, spreading out the costs? Because the plan doesn't say that. It's it's not laid out and like when it will be purchased. And I think that's where the confusion might be coming, and that's where the community might not fully understand that we're purchasing, how we're purchasing. So I would rather vote on something that clearly states what the plan is and the phasing approach versus 60,000 all at once. Because I support us going 1-to-1, but I also support it phasing out in the process.
I'll certainly yield to Mr. Thomas, but I'll jump in here if I can. I think we also have to have our eyes on the lease purchase agreement. So we have to. Right now, what we're looking at is a $21 million investment spread out over 3 years. So I want to be careful and not necessarily overcommit in the sense that we're going to necessarily save money on the front end. Where I think that the fact that we can purchase these devices, if we can stagger the purchase, what it really does, I think, is creates the possibility that we save money as we roll into future years. Because what we have done is extend the life of those newer devices. So whereas the expectation may be if we purchase a device on day one and we have a 5-year life, if we can extend the life of the newer devices, we continue to use those over for the next 2 years, then conceivably we purchase those devices 2 years from now. And so what happens is those devices are still in use by the time we roll around for potentially a new lease as we roll through as we sustain the plan. So I want to make sure it's where the savings comes in at least on the surface, the way it looks, where the savings come in at is that we're not in year 5 or year 6, we're not looking at buying another $60,000 worth of devices because we have devices in use at that time that are still operable. Gail, did I say that accurately? I think. Yeah, no, you're
muted. I hear you.
Sorry. I think so, Ron. I think just to simplify it as much as possible, we are looking at a $7 million annual budget. And as Ron said, it's really a $15 million device purchase. And then there's some other support items in that budget. So what we're looking at right now, as far as the board's concerned, there's not a contract to buy these devices. There's an available state contract where we can purchase, and we have purchased, and we vetted that through Knox County Purchasing. What we're asking the board to consider and to approve is the plan and the expenditure of the CARES Act funds to support this. And then we're going to have to work out the nitty-gritty details, if you will, of how many devices goes to each school and so forth and so on. We're looking at a budget for 60,000 devices to cover all of our students, but not every student will get a device on day one that is out of this pocket of funds. We will, as Ron tried to explain, I think, be spreading that over the course of maybe 2 fiscal years. I don't know how to answer your question better, Evity. Is that the answer?
No, that's exactly what I want to hear. I just wish we would have heard it like at the inception. But I guess that's just digging deeper. But that's exactly what I'm hoping, is that we're not buying 60,000 today and giving them when we already have 40,000 in place. But we're using that money. So it was a lack of my understanding of what that plan really meant.
That's a good question. And it made us go back and look in very much detail. So this one.
So Ron, you had mentioned, I have 2 questions. You had mentioned that in year 4 and 5, we may spread this purchase out over year 4 and 5. Would that be the result of this? So if you go back to principals and we only need to purchase 40,000 units at this time, then that would shift those funds forward. Is that correct?
That's what we're still working through the details, I think. So what we would be committing to do, if we go 1-to-1, let me say it this way. If we go 1-to-1, we have to have a plan where we're committing a device for every student in Knox County. Otherwise, we would be supplanting.
Okay.
What happens is if we purchase these devices let's say in the next couple, let's say a year from now or 2 years from now, we purchase the device for those schools that today have newer devices, but 2 years from now, then we would strategically make the purchase at that time. The issue would be if we're already into a lease agreement, that we have those lease payment obligations. But where I think the advantage for us comes in is we have every school on a plan. And then, so presumably, if we bought all of these devices on day one, then at the beginning of year 6, we have to purchase 60,000 devices. If we can stagger these purchases, so to speak, that gives us the ability, I believe, that in 5 years from now, what's happening is we actually have devices that are currently in use from the first plan, rather than purchasing another 60,000 devices. And we have a plan that the feds are signing off on, whereas it's a sustainable type plan. So I think that's some of the details we have to work through. The one thing we're absolutely conscious of is that we have schools out there with newer devices. We understand that we need to take advantage of the lifespan of those devices. We also want to be financially responsible, obviously, with the lease. And so that's why I think we have to, work carefully with the state to make sure that the state is okay with how we are rolling this plan out. So I think there's two things at stake here, that we can extend the life or take advantage of the useful life of the devices we have currently, while also not violating ESSA requirements. And there's the potential for monetary savings down the road. So I want to be careful and not over commit with details that we haven't worked out yet. But these are issues that we're keenly aware of as we go through this process. I just think we have to be careful that if we're going to commit to it, if the district commits to a one-to-one device for all students, we have to have a plan where all students will eventually receive a new device, if that makes sense.
Okay.
I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thank you. That's helpful.
Yeah, I do support us going one-to-one, especially now that I see like California schools, colleges are not going to go back in the fall, and just the potential, if we have to go online, having a plan. I guess I'm going to go, and it maybe reiterates Ms. Satterfield's concern is, with what we were voting on, is what was presented to us, is that, are we talking about the same thing? I mean, because sometimes that's what I'm a little concerned about is, I support the plan, but the way the attachment was very specifically about certain things. And I just want to make sure we're voting on what's correct, that we're now negotiating and stuff. I mean, do you feel like the way it's laid out is fine to vote on, and will give you all the flexibility to work with the federal government on what you need to do?
I believe so. Gail, how do you, I am, but let me yield to our chief technology officer to make
yes,
sure.
right.
And Cheryl, I don't know if Cheryl's on this, on here or not, but if so, I'd welcome her to speak into it. Again, I'm not sure if she is or not, but.
Yeah, and I'm, Ms. Babb, I apologize. Sometimes I think we're talking with marbles in our mouth, but I do believe that the plan as it was laid out, and the budget dollars as they are laid out, is exactly what we're still talking about. The change that we've made as a response to board questions and comments is to extend and sort of smooth or create some sustainability in the plan, based on the fact that we do have some modern devices out there in our schools right now, and not taking that complete 60,000 step on day one. So, but I do think the plan is still the same. It's just that we've extended, if you can imagine a Gantt chart, we've extended the lines out some further.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll jump in. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Satterfield had
Go ahead.
Okay, and so Cheryl, even just this afternoon, preliminary indications are that the state will approve our staggered rollout, whatever that looks like. So our concern, that's why we were a little bit hesitant. Initially, so this is what we believe we can do, and so we've gotten some pretty good news from the state today. That as long as our plan, I think, addresses all students, I think we have flexibility in how we roll it out.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, Okay, Ms. Satterfield.
So what language can we put in our vote that we're about to cast to ensure that what you're sharing with us now is what actually happens? Or are we just to operate off faith?
You can offer a substitute motion.
Okay. You put me to work. Okay.
No pressure.
Okay.
I have a couple. I'll tell you what. I have a couple other questions that I would just like to ask because I know we've all heard these questions from our community. So, Ms. Satterfield, if you want to think about that for a moment, and let me just ask a couple of questions that some of the rest of you may have. And I think we've all kind of gotten these answers, but I think just for the benefit of those watching, could we have two things that I have listed to address? One would be the issue of the internet connection for students who may not have it. And then secondly, if we can have Shannon or Teresa talk about the teacher training piece of it and what the plans are for those things. So if we could talk about the Wi-Fi first, would that be Dr. Reiswick or Gail?
I'll take a stab at the Wi-Fi, and Russ Oakes has been involved in our conversations, as well as Tammy Campbell and the staff. We are working with a committee with the Knoxville Chamber to address those concerns around families that do not have internet access in the home. Our first step is conducting a survey, and we met this morning with our research and evaluation group, Steve Rutter's group, and determine next steps to sort of collect some information across the district where we have inaccessibility, where we have either broadband issues or financial issues that are keeping families from having access at home. So based on that information, we have a committee meeting with our chamber partners on June 9th, I believe it is, to discuss how our community can help support and address those needs. And I'm sure we'll be taking next steps from there. But we've had several parties indicate interest in helping us with that challenge.
Okay, great. Any questions on that? Okay. And then the teacher training piece, Shannon, would you like to take that one?
Sure, I would be happy to.
Thank you.
So we released a Canvas course yesterday, actually. It is a level 1 entry-level training. It is something that teachers can opt into during the month of May. And it is an intro to Canvas for those who've never used Canvas before. And then it is also for veteran teachers. We worked with a group of our teachers who use Canvas very frequently. They're really good about making changes in the background. And so the veteran teachers, were giving them support around efficiencies and new features that we think that they will like knowing about. The end of that course, there's a trauma-informed component that we are using. So 41 of our schools are already trauma-informed schools. This piece for the schools that have not done any trauma-informed training. And we are working with all of our staff to understand that even students who've never had any experience trauma before are quite possibly experiencing some now with some food insecurity, and listening to the nightly news right now can make people a little anxious, and just being aware of where our students are with when they reconnect with us, and how we might use some of those trauma-informed practices to reconnect and create a place of safety for them, whether we're in person or not. Starting June 1st, we have a very robust course that will be going out. We are in the process of putting the finishing touches on that by Friday of this week. And then it goes out to, I think right now we have 250 people who are planning to review it and give feedback to us. We'll take that feedback and then send that out to all staff starting June 1st. And it goes into a greater vision around what we intend for this initiative to cover, which is really just a step in what we've always tried to strive for, which is equitable education for every child in Knox County. And this is one way that we're going to take a step further in that when we find ourselves in these times of closure. Through that program, we are looking at that vision. We're looking at our digital tools. We're looking at social emotional learning and how we also think about classroom management if we are in a distance environment. We're looking at content specific tools. So each of the content supervisors is working with a group to look at what's ideal practice and then what are the successive approximations of that practice when we are either with limited technology, a balance of technology and in person, or if we're fully remote, and kind of giving people a taste of some things to think about so that they're ready for a July 6th course that we're going to unroll, which will be going very deeply into people's content area. We are taking a lot of feedback from all of these courses so that we know where teachers are telling us they want more support, and that will help to drive the July 6th course and our district learning day on August 4th. Undergirding all of that is a leadership strand that we're working on that will help us to think about how do we lead in both digital environments where we're intending to build some digital supports, and if we find ourselves in places where we have to be remote. So we've been doing a lot of learning around Microsoft Teams, which is something we all have access to. And as it turns out, we can do, if we had to, we could do virtual parent conferences. We've looked at ways you can call parents and then nobody has individual cell phone numbers or phone numbers. Ways that you could do parent conferences, open houses, and then also some ways to do some teacher collaboration as we start thinking about, I think about my first year of teaching and think about not having colleagues right next door to go to and ask for help. Microsoft Teams has a way that you can do that. And so as we start onboarding staff, getting them connected with each other so that they have support as they're navigating, that possibility. So that is going to be part of our whole summer is geared around thinking through providing those supports. We've got it pretty well built out at this point. We're getting a lot of feedback, but we're trying to keep it agile enough that as we get feedback from the field and learn new things, we are constantly reading about what other people are doing across the state and across the country. We're following what's going on in other countries and how they're working with this. And so we're trying to keep it agile enough that we can bring in that new learning as we see things that work. This is going to have to be an ongoing plan that will be embedded throughout all of next year. I'm stealing a phrase from Teresa. We are building a farmer's market, not a cathedral. So if we think about it that way, a cathedral is completely built and you have what you have at the end of the building process. A farmer's market, you set it up the best way that you know how at the time. But the next week you have lessons learned and you might set it up a little bit differently because you learned some things. So our biggest message in our PD for our teachers is give yourselves a little grace. It's going to take us some time to figure out how to do this really well, but I have every confidence that they will, and we'll be here to help and support.
Right. Mr. Norman.
Thank you. I'd just like to make a couple of comments relative to what's been said. Just notice two words that trouble me. Evity brought up faith, and now Ms. Jackson's brought up grace. And it seems like there's a whole lot of that, both of those, that are going to be required to make this work. My fundamental issue with it, and I'm going to vote no, and not that I'm against one-to-one, but given the times we live in, I mean, we don't even know our revenue sources. And what we do know is that this purchase is going to increase our budget. Now, we're reacting to an unusual situation. If this was to happen again next year, we've got enough devices that we could make do with our middle school and high school kids. I don't see the big deal about elementary anyway. And so I think we're biting off a lot of debt that we don't know how we're going to be able to fund this in the future. So that's kind of my issue. Thanks.
Mr. McMillan.
Along the same lines, what you were saying, Mr. Norman, I think you do have to a lot of faith if you follow this. But is Ron still around? I have a couple of questions that I would like to ask. Ron, you still there?
Sure am.
Excuse me. It's 12, is it 12 and a half million that we're going to get?
It's probably more, it's between 12.8 and 12.9. So it's closer to around 12.9.
Okay. Let's say right
okay.
at Now, when are we going to get that money? And are we going to get it all at one time?
So Cheryl Martin, our federal programs director, she's working. Oh, I see Cheryl. I may let her respond to that as far as because I think it's on a reimbursable basis, but I'm going to let Cheryl, if you don't mind, Cheryl, to make more intelligently than I could on that.
So, Mr. McMillan, what we know at this time, the guidance at this time is that these dollars, the CARES dollars, will be a reimbursable. So it'll be a draw. So the money will be spent, and then it'll be a reimbursable draw every quarter. And then to your point, the question you asked just a minute ago, so Knox County should be getting about $12.9 million, but we also have to serve our non-public school students and our charter school out of those funds as well. So the equitable services will come off the top of that.
But all the money, we have to spend it first, right? Before we get reimbursed for it.
So we don't have to spend it all at first. We spend it over a period of time, and then you can reimburse it. And right now, what they're saying is that those funds have a shelf life until June of 2022.
And I'll jump in too. That's how I don't know if I say all, but that's how all major federal funds work as well. Like Title I is all on a reimbursable type basis. Budget's probably 13 or 14 million a year. Mm-hmm. So it's really no different than how we've been operating with Title I.
We do that on an annual basis, don't we? As far as reimbursement.
We do a reimbursement every quarter. Yes, sir.
Every quarter.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, I guess here's where I'm headed. How much are we going to have to come up with next year to put in the budget to take care of whatever we spend?
I'll try to answer that this way. I think I understand the question. So right now we have, let me use Title I as an example because it works the same way. So Title I on an annual basis equates, I would say, roughly to the same amount that the ESSA, or rather the CARES dollars are. It's around 13 million after what Cheryl said, after private school and charter payout. We may be looking at somewhere less than $1 million or so around that. So what we would do is we would purchase this over time. So, I don't think it would put us in any more of any financial bind than it would based on what the board just approved with IDEA and Title I as well, because we have dollars in the bank to cover that we can replenish fairly quickly with a reimbursement type basis. So I don't know that we've never found ourselves in such a bind where we had to front load the budget in order to cover our Title I reimbursements or our IDEA reimbursements or any of those. So I hope that helps answer.
I understand that. What I'm getting at is somewhere down the road, are we not going to, as these things wear out, we're going to have to roll them into our budget, our annual budget.
Yes, that is correct,
So
Mr. Millen. You are right.
In essence, if you get whatever, if we spend $20 million, it's going to have to go down the road, be rolled in to the annual budget each year. Is it not?
Yes, and I would say that I would also answer it this way, that regardless of what we do with these dollars, that's pretty much the scenario we're going to find ourselves with if we utilize these dollars. So if the board decided to use these dollars to fund some other initiative, I'm going to say to fund positions, then we would find ourselves in the same predicament, I think. So the only way to avoid that predicament is if we could identify something that we only needed one time. So I think we would have that issue come up regardless back, and it's very valid, the issue that you raise. Back 10, 11 years ago, during the recession, the federal government supplied funds. It was the American Recovery Relief Act era, I think is what they called it. Mm-hmm. And what those dollars essentially did was allowed us to save, I believe, I'm doing this from memory, 100 teaching positions 2 years in a row. That was a little bit dangerous, but we needed the funds. Otherwise, we would be faced with mass layoffs. So what that did is it allowed us to buy time until those revenue streams picked back up. And so it really served its purpose. The hope and the expectation would be that over time we would see revenues pick back up. Obviously, we can't guarantee that. But I would just say that regardless of this funding, I suspect, and unless somebody can think of something I'm not thinking of, I suspect that we would have this predicament regardless. We would either, the only way to avoid it is some sort of a one-time initiative, and I'm not sure on the surface what that would mean, or just refuse the funds.
I understand what you're saying.
But you make a great point.
This would be a minor in comparison to the dollars we're talking about, I guess. And I don't remember whether you were still here when this happened or not. But if you weren't, well, I apologize. But we got some money, and we hired in the spring. We hired like 65 teachers, and then somebody to supervise them. And it was technically, it was a one-time deal. But the then superintendent just rolled it into the budget the next year, and it's been with us ever since. So, I guess we're going to have this ever since. Also, I guess that was what I was getting to.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But I'm not against it, but I do have some reservations about us just grabbing for money that just because it's out there, we'll find something to. That's what I want to make sure with that we're going to use it to the students and the system's benefit as opposed to just throwing dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McMillan. I think there's no question that next year at this time when we're looking at the budget, it's going, we're going to continue to have a challenge because, I think everybody on the board understands that we have funding for this year through the CARES Act, but after that, it will need to come from our budget. And so that's definitely going to be an issue. My question that I've asked Shannon Jackson and Dr. Reiswick, and also when I speak with principals, putting aside, if if funding weren't an issue, is this something that we would want to do anyway? Is this something that we need to do, but we haven't done because of the other priorities that we've needed to fund? And so Dr. Reiswick, if you would want to speak to that, or Ms. Jackson, when I speak to principals, their answer is, absolutely. If we, I know in my district, most of our technology that we have has been bought by parents, and the parents in my area, they would like to see the school system take on the ownership of those devices. So would either of you like to speak to that point?
I'll be happy to. I can't get my video up, sorry, but but I'll be happy to take that, Ms. Horn. Thank you. So it's interesting because we were talking through that very thing, and prior to the whole COVID-19 hitting, I think I got my video. Sorry. There we go. Good deal. Prior to COVID-19 hitting, it was funny. We were talking about that. We were actually meeting as an executive team and talking through this very thing, our shortage on technology and where our machines were aging out as far as to meet the testing components and those kinds of things for online that were coming ahead. We've talked for the last couple budget cycles about the fact that, kind of the two big instructional materials that our teachers use are either technology and devices or textbooks, and how, you all know that firsthand. Neither one of those has really made a budget item. It's been fund balancing over the last couple of years to get to that. So to answer your question, I think definitely both technology and materials like textbooks and things like that are definitely resources to enhance teachers' classrooms. And I think we just never have had the funds to be able to keep that up. But it was interesting. We were having that very conversation prior to this virus outbreak.
Thank you. And Mr. McPherson, could this funding be used for something like textbooks?
On the surface, I would say that would be problematic because it needs to be somehow or another. It's not necessarily, we have flexibility in how to use the funds, but the points that I've read so far, the guidance I received from the state, I don't want to say no. I think it could be problematic, but I would feel better reaching out and getting confirmation of that first. I would be hesitant right now to say yes, but we haven't received to be frank, the guidance is we have not been bombarded with information, and there are parameters with how it's used. Technology definitely is allowable. We have also received some guidance that, okay, if we want to attach it for other things within our budget, we do have some flexibility to do that. I wish I had a better answer, but I would prefer to get some guidance on that.
Okay. Mr. McMillan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ron, how would, I heard you say technology, so they'll approve most any kind of technology, but the textbooks and the technology, or what we're looking at, the technology, would both wear out and eventually have to be replaced, would they not?
Yes.
If
okay. We find too that with textbooks over the years, we have historically, at least from time to time, used fund balance dollars, which would be classified as one-time dollars for textbook purchases, because we just didn't have the capacity in the existing budget to fund those. So it would not be unprecedented in using one-time funds for textbooks. But
5 years, we'd go 7 with.
Yeah. So I think, again, we haven't received a ton of guidance from in how to utilize these funds. We have received information, But I think, in fairness to the state, even, I think the state is reaching out to the federal government too, because they're trying to get some answers as well. So, you know, I'm hesitant to say that we cannot use it for textbooks. I think it might be problematic, but I'm going to stop short of saying that we can't until I would get confirmation for that.
Well, I don't want to use it for that, but in reference to Susan's question, I just wondered why, since both items would eventually have to be replaced, why you could use it for one but not for the other.
Well, I'm sorry, say, yeah.
Well, I think it's probably, Mike, one of the reasons is that the CARES Act funding is to provide for problem areas that you had during the COVID-19 closure. So technology, that's why technology is high on that list, because that's a large reason that people have cited, you know, for not being able to continue with school. So I think that's one of the reasons.
Okay.
Right. I think the more we can attach this to a COVID related issue, then I think the better.
Well, let me ask one other thing, then I'll be quiet. And I guess I don't know, you or maybe Gail should answer this. If we should have a setback when about the time school starts, would we be ready to just pick up and start? Would we be able to supply each student with some type of device in a matter of days?
Yes, Mr. McMillan, that's the directive that the superintendent gave us, is to find a way to make sure that we could issue devices to all of our students on very short terms, if that eventuality happened, if that's the worst case scenario. So we've had a little practice in sort of drive-by deployments, if you will, with devices. And we would reenact that on a much larger scale if that were to happen.
Well, obviously we hope that doesn't happen, but you know, there is a lot of talk around the country about, you know, maybe schools are not starting up, but I guess we would make that decision as a board and the superintendent. But anyway, I just want to know how quick we could get into it if we should absolutely have to. Thank you, Gail.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Other comments or questions?
Madam Chair, is this where I give my substitute motion?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, we ready? I propose a substitute motion that approves the use of CARES Act funding to fund 60,000 Chromebook devices that will be purchased over a multi-year process to ensure we use the life of our current 39,846 devices already in the system. Board is to review device purchases as they arise.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Christie seconds. Okay, and discussion. Ms. Babb?
Could we have Mr. McPherson just weigh in if this works for what we're trying to do?
And if I could just ask another question, that motion specifically says Chromebooks. I'm wondering if, for the reason of special needs, if it should not specifically say Chromebooks, but devices for or something. So we may need that question answered also. Mr. McPherson.
Right. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think if we could maybe put some wording in there that with respect to CARES funding that would say to help in the purchase of these devices, because the reality of it is the CARES dollars are not sufficient to fund the entire investment of this. So in other words, we can't utilize strictly CARES funding to go one-to-one, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
we're looking at a multi-year deployment. So I'm not sure if Ms. Satterfield would be open to that, but I just want to be careful and not lock it in to say that CARES will actually fund the one-to-one initiative, because the CARES dollars are insufficient to do that. They definitely will help, and they would supplement what we do. So.
Okay, and then Mr. Myers, can you speak to just the issue of whether that verbiage would take care of special needs devices?
Sure. I'll defer to Mr. Dupler on the specific verbiage, but as we spoke in the work session, we'll still be working with our families of children with disabilities individually to determine what type of device they may need, or what type of assistive technology they may need to access a particular device. So in terms of what the board would be voting on, I'll defer to Mr. Dupler on that.
Okay.
Go ahead. Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I would say that we can use the Chromebook language, but go a little bit further to say or other device as applicable. That way, I think the spirit of the motion is to purchase Chromebooks as opposed to say all MacBook Airs or something like that. So, but if you added that little bit of other language, other devices as applicable, then that would solve the issue.
Okay. And Ms. Bounds, did you have a question?
No, I was just going to ask Mr. Dupler to speak to the substitute motion if it was in correct form and it was okay.
Yes, I mean, with that qualification, Ms. Satterfield and I we're trying to work on that, offline, so to speak. So that would certainly work. And then I think what was the other concern besides and then, Mr. McPherson's talking about saying to help fund. I mean, so help can be added. So Ms. Satterfield, if you want to perhaps restate the motion and then have the same second, if that would happen, and then we can fix those issues.
Okay, we're ready.
Okay, go ahead.
I propose a substitute motion that approves the use of CARES Act funding to help fund 60,000 Chromebook or other necessary devices that will be purchased over a multi-year process to ensure we use the life of our current 39,846 devices already in the system. Board is to review device purchases as they arise.
And I'll second.
Okay, thank you. The motion was made by Ms. Satterfield and seconded by Ms. Christie. And do we have discussion? Okay, Ms. Coatney, we'll have a roll call vote.
Satterfield?
Does Bab?
Yeah, can I ask a question? Are we voting on whether to approve this, or I just want to be sure what we're actually voting on?
A yes vote would be to support Ms. Satterfield's substitute motion just read.
Okay, thank you.
And so therefore the original motion goes away.
Thank you.
Would you restate that? I didn't hear.
Me or what Virginia asked?
Restate the motion, please.
Oh, no problem. I propose a substitute motion that approves the use of CARES Act funding to help fund 60,000 Chromebooks or other necessary devices that will be purchased over a multi-year process to ensure we use the life of our current 39,846 devices already in the system. Board is to review device purchases as they arise.
Oh, but what was the answer to what we were actually committing to? There's not any dollar amount in there.
I think that. Oh, go ahead. Are you talking to me, Mr. Mike? Anybody?
Mr. Peterson, would you like to take that?
I'm not trying to be difficult, but I'm having trouble hearing.
It basically would authorize the district to purchase devices over time of using the CARES Act funding. Is that correct to say?
Using
the CARES Act funding.
the total amount?
It doesn't say that. The motion does not say that. It says it would use, why don't you, can you read it again?
So the motion says the 60,000 Chromebooks, and so that 60,000 is, if that needs to be replaced with 7 million, Mr. McPherson, that can be done.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a commitment that the average person can understand.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm going.
Okay.
I didn't know whether it was that, whether we were committing to, 13 million or 12.9 or whatever. That's fine.
Mr. McPherson?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to make sure too, yes, that I think that gets it. Well, one thing too, I want to make sure we get clarification on Ms. Satterfield's last part of the substitute motion, because I want to make sure we're in compliance with what the board is asking us to do. It's something about come back for review. Is that before every purchase? The only reason I'm asking, I just don't want to endanger the timing,
Yeah. So
well,
the
we want to
motion,
comply with whatever, but
yeah, the motion just says to review devices, not to vote on it, not the board, just to review. And I interpret that as, inform us that this is what's happening.
as a report, so to speak. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that.
Okay, so I'm sorry, Ms. Satterfield, can you read it one more time? Because I want to hear the end of it, because in my mind, I heard that we would have to approve before they purchase, and that would be a problem because they need to be able to move more, faster than we do. So can you read that one more time?
And Mr. Mike, would you like your part to be the 60,000 or 7 million?
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Can we add in there over the 5 years, because we're really committing ourselves to a 5-year plan.
Are we?
I believe we are. Is that correct, Mr. McPherson? Because if we're leasing units, we're not doing that for 1 year. We're committing to 5 years.
Why don't we just vote on the whole thing? I'm sorry about my voice, but I mean, again, go ahead, Ron.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. If the board commits to do 1-to-1, what we are committing to is to do 1-to-1. And in order to do that, it would require a $21 million investment spread out over 3 years. That would be approximately $15 million lease costs, with annual support costs built on top of that. So I think we have to understand that that when we commit to 1-to-1, we have a requirement to provide devices to every student, and that is an investment over multiple years.
Well, could you change to where it said with the intent to work toward 1-to-1? We are now approving $7-8 million right now to approve. What was the figure?
60,000 devices.
Was it 40,000? Well, how many Chromebooks?
60,000.
60,000. With that, and we will fund the remainder in the future. Would that work?
Yes, and I think that's kind of the only thing that's missing from what you're stating is the actual dollar amount, that $7 million amount. That's the only thing that kind of is not in this.
Well, let's say average person.
Yeah, and I'm okay with putting in the 7 million.
What you're doing, and then just throwing a big number of devices out there. It doesn't matter, really, but
that's good.
I just think it would be better to do it that way.
That's fine. And if you want to, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Dupler, Ms. Satterfield could add the language, and if Ms. Christie is okay with it, then that would become the verbiage for our substitute motion.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, Ms. Satterfield can propose some altered language, and then yeah, Ms. Christie can second that.
Okay, Madam Chair, before we read it again, are you good with the multi-year process, or you put in the 5-year process?
So that it reads multi-year?
It already reads multi-year. Do you want me to put
okay. No, that's fine. No, that's fine.
All right, third time's the charm. Let's go. Here we go. I propose a substitute motion that approves the use of $7 million CARE Act funding to help fund 60,000 Chromebooks or other necessary devices that will be purchased over a multi-year process to ensure we use the life of our current 39,846,000 devices already in the system. Purchase reports will be provided to the board as they occur.
I'll second.
Okay, so we have a substitute motion by Ms. Satterfield and a second by Ms. Christie. Do we have discussion?
Do we have a dollar figure?
Yes, sir. 7 million. 7 million.
I'm sorry, I apologize.
There you go.
Okay. Mr. Norman, do you have a question?
No, just a comment.
Okay.
I appreciate Ebony. I love Ebony, but this still, I think we're being irresponsible given there's so much unknown that's coming. And so I can't vote for this substitute motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. Other comments? Okay, Ms. Coatney, we'll do a roll call vote.
Ms. Satterfield?
Yes.
Ms. Owen?
We can't hear you.
You're on mute, Ms. Owen.
Yes.
Mr. Norman?
No.
Ms. Babb?
Yes.
Ms. Hill?
Yes.
Ms. Bounds?
Yes.
Mr. McMillan?
Yes.
Ms. Christie?
Yes.
Ms. Horn?
Yes.
8 yes votes and 1 no vote.
Okay, and motion carries. Okay, thank you. And we have added an agenda item to the end of our time today regarding the budget, our next steps for budget process. Ms. Hill, would you like to start us off?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This actually is spurred by a comment that you made, Mr. McMillan, during our last meeting, asking if it would be possible for all of us to be together when together in one place as opposed to Zoom when we try to discuss this budget, given the fact that it is so detailed and so much involved in this process. I feel very strongly that this should occur, and we clearly see around us that that there are meetings that are occurring. I think we're all adults enough to make whatever decision we feel like is best for us personally, as to whether attend in person or attend via Zoom. I'd like to talk about if there's a legality with us using both mediums at the same time, should some of us want to be together and others may not feel comfortable with that. Mr. Dupler, is there anything that would preclude that kind of a setup given these extraordinary times we're in?
Well, I mean, the way I read Governor Lee's executive order number 16, the board take that along with the fact that the main assembly room is being used according to the guidelines for General Sessions Court. So you know, the meeting room that we would be using is being used under these circumstances. So taking those two things together, the school system could put together what I would call a hybrid meeting, which would be one that you could have the board as participants and certainly Knox County School staff. But the catch would be the public. And I would recommend, or my office would recommend, that at the very least it would have to be live streamed so that the public could see it as it occurs, and probably some type of mechanism be made for the public to make a comment, perhaps more than what's going on with the Zoom meeting.
I appreciate that, and I concur. Talking to I guess Mr. Oakes or Ms. Baird, as far as the technology piece goes, is this something that you feel like could be reasonably accommodated were we to choose to meet this way?
I think I would, this is Russ. I think I would defer to Gail on that, or, you know, I'm not thoroughly versed enough in the details of how to make that work.
All right.
Okay, Gail.
Hi, I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. So we're talking about a hybrid type of meeting, and the question is around voting or taking action, or is it just around participation? Are we talking about the budget workshop?
It would be both. We would be discussing and then voting. So it would basically be if any board members did not feel okay to meet in person, could they participate via Zoom? And then in addition to that, I'm assuming we could do this same kind of format so that the public could also be watching at the same time.
My only concern there is the network at City County Building. We'd have to do some technical checking to make sure.
It would be at the AJ.
I'm sorry?
At the AJ.
Oh, it would be at the AJ. Okay. I think so. I think that we could pull that off. Is there any concern around legality, I guess would be my my question, in terms of the statute that allowed for remote meetings for board. Gary, do you have any concerns with regards to that? Or is that where we started this conversation?
Yeah. And I mean, what you're talking about is Executive Order 16, you know, that allows for these electronic meetings. But, you know, the way I read that order, it does not preclude a hybrid, allowing some people attending by, you know, using the health department guidelines, the social distancing and things, plus some others attending electronically. So, I mean, it's a little vague. I mean, you know, as you might expect, but what it does require is that at the very least, live streaming to the public.
Okay. So we will certainly test that as we've done with all of our previous meeting setups, and we'll work with public affairs to make sure that that's operational.
All right. Thank you. Is there a need for discussion or a vote on this suggestion?
I don't think we need to vote. We had kind of already been talking about that. So I think that we just need to work out the details. And so since we've moved it to the 27th, we're looking at having it in the AJ. And I think the big thing will just be how to involve board members who aren't able to be present, and how do we involve the public in just giving them an opportunity to, like Mr. Dupler said, be able to comment and ask questions more in a live manner rather than an email manner. So we'll need to work through the details on that.
Right. And I certainly have no objection where we meet, whether it's the AJ or the City County building. My just general comment might be that if spacing and distance is a concern, that that might be better accommodated at the City County building. But again, I will defer to those that know much more than I do about the logistics.
Okay, we'll take that into account.
Thank you, Ms. Hill, for offering that suggestion. And I think you'll find that when you can look at somebody, even if it's, a few feet away, that it works better than there's some other things you pick up as far as communication and stuff. I think the AJ would work. We just have to scatter out, but I believe that it would work. Now it wasn't in the governor's order, but just for your information, Gary, you might want to check with your boss on this. There is something that says that you cannot, well, we were talking about Skyping back in those days, but I think this same principle would apply, that you couldn't participate as far as voting unless you were out of town. So,
No, you're right, Mr. McMillan. And that's been part of board policy for quite some time. But the governor's order did, allow for those rules, for that law and those rules to be relaxed during, dealing with the COVID. But you're right. Those rules and laws do exist. Yeah.
And, I think the advantage to the AJ, even over the main assembly room, actually is that at the AJ, board members can sit every other chair and the staff can use the gallery seating and just come up to the podium for comment. So we can probably, or we could even put a table at the, to kind of finish the horseshoe. And so there are ways to spread out, I think, in that room that would accommodate some distancing.
I agree.
So we'll work on that. We've already been talking about it, so we'll continue to work in that direction, and I think that'll work.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Great suggestion. Any other comments or questions? Okay, we'll try to work out those details in the next few days and get that information to board members. And Mr. Thomas, you mentioned a virtual public town hall meeting. That's still a possibility, I'm assuming.
Right, it's still a possibility. We're having conversations about that, and we'll get some information out pretty soon on that.
Okay. All right, great.
That's good. Thank you.
Okay, great. Okay. If there's nothing. Yes, Mr. McMillan.
Just one quick comment instead of the superintendent. Based on your remarks, I feel like y'all have gone a long way toward solving the graduation problem, and it's going to work for most people. And I, as a board member, want to tell you how much I appreciate y'all doing that.
Thank you. Appreciate the board as well. So appreciate your comments, and we got a lot of feedback. So and appreciate Mayor Jacobs and his support for the plan.
Yeah, I think we all appreciate that work, and it's such a balance between making sure that we're being safe as a community so that we can get kids back into the classroom in the fall. And so that's been the intention of working with the health department. So thank you, Mr. Thomas, for all your hard work, and thanks to all the staff for all of the work that's gone into preparing for the next school year. There's just a huge amount of work that has gone into the proposal, and also planning for teacher development and for all of the things that need to be taken into consideration with not knowing what the fall may bring quite yet. So we're all hopeful that we will be back in school, and as we talked about last week, we recognize that the important relationships that students have with teachers and that teachers have with students is vital and cannot be replaced over a screen. So please, everybody, do your part to try to mitigate the spread of this virus so that we can get our kiddos back in the classroom and let the learning continue. So unless anybody has anything else, we will stand adjourned.